As evening settles over ancient Athens, the bustling marketplace slowly softens into a landscape of long shadows and fading voices. Merchants pack away their goods, stray dogs wander between the stone columns, and the warm daylight slips into a gentle amber glow. Among the clutter of stalls and scattered pottery, there stands a massive clay jar, weathered by sun, cracked by time, and so ordinary that most people pass by without a second glance. Yet when the city grows quiet and the last footsteps drift into the distance, that jar stirs. Inside it lives a man who has chosen this hollow vessel as his shelter, not out of necessity, but out of conviction. This peculiar figure is Diogenes of Sinope. He sits within the curved walls of the jar as if it were the most natural place in the world, watching Athens with a calm, almost amused expression. To others, life unfolds in frantic bursts, rushing to meetings, arguing over politics, chasing wealth as if their worth depends on it. But to Diogenes, all of it looks like a strange performance. He sees people weighed down by invisible expectations, each one trying desperately to appear respectable and important. From his resting place in the jar, he studies them the way an astronomer might observe distant stars, curious, detached, unbothered. The jar itself is nothing special. No roof, no furniture, no decoration, just an empty curve of clay, warmed by the fading heat of the day. But to Diogenes, this simplicity is freedom. With nothing to protect, nothing to maintain, and nothing to polish, he has stripped his life down to its simplest form. He owns no possessions that can be stolen, fears no landlord who might raise a rent, and carries no burden of social status. His world is small, but in that smallness, he finds a vast and unshakable peace. Occasionally, children gather nearby, whispering to one another about the strange man who lives in a jar. They tilt their heads, trying to understand him. Diogenes notices their curiosity, but rather than scold them or send them away, he simply watches with a faint smile. There is nothing threatening about him, but everything about him unsettles people who cling tightly to rules and decorum. He behaves in ways that make the city uncomfortable, not out of hostility, but because he refuses to pretend. As dusk deepens into night, Diogenes leans against the edge of the jar, listening to the soft murmur of a city settling into stillness. Torches flicker in the distance, throwing warm light across the agora. The breeze carries the scent of cooking fires and distant sea air, and for a moment Athens feels like a quiet dream suspended in time. While others retreat to their homes filled with worries about tomorrow, Diogenes closes his eyes with nothing troubling his mind. No anxieties, no ambitions, no fear of losing anything, because he has chosen a life where there is nothing to lose. Here, in this humble jar, begins the strange, unforgettable story of the philosopher who rejected everything society offered him, not to escape life, but to understand it. And as the night wraps around the city, Diogenes drifts into sleep, as untouched by the world as the jar that shelters him. Morning rises slowly over Athens, warming the marble streets and stirring the city into motion once again. As the sun climbs, shopkeepers roll up their awnings, fishermen haul their nets inland, and citizens begin their daily rituals of conversation, business, and gossip. The agora fills with footsteps and voices, each person wrapped tightly in the routines that define their lives. And stepping into this tide of activity, moving against it with quiet indifference, is Diogenes. He wanders through the marketplace without any sense of urgency, his cloak loosely draped over his shoulders, his posture relaxed, as if the entire city were nothing more than scenery in a play he has long since outgrown. Where others walk with purpose, Diogenes strolls. Where others greet each other with formalities and practiced politeness, he lets silence speak for him. The polite customs of Athens, bowing, flattering, pretending to care about status, are invisible to him, as if the city is asking him to play a game he has no interest in joining. He watches a group of men bustling toward an important meeting, their expressions tight with self-importance. With a slight tilt of his head, Diogenes murmurs just loud enough for them to hear, "There go the slaves, though their chains are made of schedules, not iron." The men stiffen, unsure whether to be offended or confused, and in that moment of hesitation, he simply walks away. To Diogenes, life is filled with people obeying rules they never questioned, and he finds the whole spectacle strangely amusing. Throughout the day, he drifts from one corner of the marketplace to another, breaking every rule of etiquette without even trying. He eats wherever he happens to be hungry, rests wherever he becomes tired, and speaks only when the moment interests him. To the Athenians, who value order, dignity, and a strict sense of what is proper, his behavior feels like a puzzle with no answer. Some shake their heads at him. Some mutter under their breath. Others, secretly entertained, watch him the way one might watch a wandering poet or a mysterious traveler. Officials occasionally approach him with stern expressions, insisting that certain behaviors are not acceptable in public, that this is Athens, not the wilderness. Diogenes listens with the same calm attention someone might give to a distant bird, and then, in the gentlest possible voice, asks them why the city's rules should matter more than nature's. He does not insult them directly. Instead, he dismantles their seriousness simply by refusing to participate in it. Authority loses its power when confronted with someone who cares nothing for approval or punishment. One afternoon, a polished aristocrat, draped in expensive cloth and wearing the expression of a man who expects admiration, stops in front of Diogenes. With a theatrical sweep of his arm, he demands to know why the philosopher refuses to respect the customs of civilized society. Diogenes studies the man's elaborate outfit for a long moment before replying softly, "I see your pride through your clothes." The aristocrat sputters, unable to decide whether he has been insulted or simply observed with uncomfortable accuracy, and walks away faster than he arrived. Diogenes continues on, unconcerned, a quiet smile lingering on his face. He is not trying to provoke, he is revealing. Every time he ignores a greeting or laughs at a pompous speech, he exposes how fragile social rules truly are. He shows people that much of their behavior is a performance, one they repeat without knowing why. As the afternoon light begins to fade and the bustle of the agora softens into evening calm, Diogenes returns to his familiar corner. He doesn't reflect on the day with pride or frustration. He simply accepts it as another chapter in a life free from expectations. The city, with all its rules and rituals, continues to whirl around him, but Diogenes remains untouched, an island of quiet rebellion in the sea of Athenian routine. By the time the first torches flicker to life and the sky darkens into deep blue, he has already settled back into his jar, content, unburdened, and unconcerned with how many people he puzzled or provoked. For Diogenes, breaking the rules is not an act of defiance, it is simply a natural way to live.
The sun rises high above Athens, turning the white stone of the city into a canvas of warm, shimmering light. The marketplace wakes in full force today, citizens arguing over prices, philosophers gathering in tight circles to debate, officials marching through the agora with the self-assured posture of men who believe they control the rhythm of the city. To most Athenians, these figures of authority are a constant presence, their commands shaping the rules of everyday life. But for Diogenes, they are simply another part of the scenery, no more intimidating than a gust of wind or a stray dog crossing the square. He makes his way through the crowd with a slow, unhurried gait, completely unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, about how many regulations he is ignoring. A guard spots him first, recognizing the philosopher instantly. With a practiced frown, the guard approaches, determined to remind Diogenes that certain behaviors are considered improper in a city of laws and order. Diogenes listens to the lecture with gentle patience, his eyes drifting toward the sky, as if he is counting clouds rather than absorbing commands. When the guard finally finishes, expecting obedience, or at least apology, Diogenes turns to him and says softly, "If I lived as you wish, I would not live as myself." And then he simply walks away. Such moments happen often, and each time the reaction is the same, a mix of frustration, confusion, and reluctant amusement. Diogenes does not threaten or resist, he simply refuses to pretend that authority holds any power over a man who desires nothing. A person who owns nothing cannot be bribed. A person who fears nothing cannot be controlled. And a person who respects only truth cannot be impressed by uniforms or titles. Later in the day, a pair of officials approach him with an air of importance, discussing among themselves what should be done about this strange philosopher who disregards every sacred custom. They speak about public decency, proper behavior, and the need for citizens to act with dignity. Diogenes listens, his expression calm, almost serene. When they pause, expecting him to justify himself, he asks in a mild, almost innocent tone, "Tell me, if a man loses his freedom to please others, what does he have left?" The question hangs in the air, unsettling in its simplicity. The officials offer no answer, for none comes easily.
As the day unfolds, Diogenes encounters others who attempt to confront him. A wealthy merchant demands respect. A proud general expects fear. A bureaucrat insists on obedience. To each of them, Diogenes responds not with defiance, but with indifference, as if their authority dissolves before it ever reaches him. When a general boasts of his important victories, Diogenes only shrugs and murmurs, "You conquer cities. I conquer the need to impress them." The general walks away, uncertain whether he has been insulted or enlightened. The remarkable thing is not that Diogenes disobeys authority, it is that he disarms it. He makes power look fragile simply by refusing to acknowledge it. People who rely on commands grow uneasy when those commands fall on someone who does not care. And in that uneasiness, the truth emerges. Authority exists only for those who accept it. As the afternoon fades into evening, the city cools, and the torches begin to burn with steady amber light. Diogenes returns to the quiet comfort of his jar, leaving behind a trail of baffled officials and unsettled dignitaries. They talk among themselves long after he is gone, wondering how a man with no wealth, no status, and no home can walk with such fearlessness. But Diogenes never wonders. He stretches his legs, leans back against the smooth clay wall, and closes his eyes as if the entire city is nothing more than a passing story. He has no interest in power, no desire for praise, and no fear of reprimand. For a man who lives without attachments, authority is nothing more than a polite suggestion carried on the wind. And so, the night settles once more, wrapping Athens in its gentle veil, while Diogenes rests in perfect, uncomplicated freedom, untouched by the rules that bind the world around him. Morning comes slowly over Athens, casting long ribbons of light across the narrow streets. Merchants raise their stalls, philosophers gather in quiet clusters, and citizens begin their daily movements like actors stepping onto a familiar stage. Among them moves Diogenes, unhurried, barefoot, and holding something unusual in his hand, a small lamp. Its flame flickers in the brightness of midday, barely visible under the strong Athenian sun. People pause as he passes, whispering to each other with amused curiosity. Why carry a lamp when daylight floods the city? Why wander the agora as though searching for something invisible to everyone else? Diogenes walks with the same tranquil stride, lifting the lamp every few steps, as if examining faces, inspecting expressions, studying the flow of the crowd with a patient, deliberate calm. A group of young men finally approach him, their curiosity sharper than their manners. "What are you doing with that lamp?" one of them asks, half laughing. Diogenes raises the lamp toward the young man's face, the flame trembling softly between them. "I am looking," he says in a tone almost too gentle to be ironic. "For an honest man." The young men fall silent, unsure whether they should laugh, feel insulted, or simply walk away. Diogenes isn't waiting for a reaction. He lowers the lamp and continues his slow journey through the marketplace. Everywhere he goes, the reaction repeats. Some citizens shake their heads at this strange philosopher, dismissing it as another of his eccentric displays. Others follow him at a distance, intrigued by the mystery he carries so openly. A lamp in daylight is too absurd to ignore, yet too symbolic to fully understand at first glance. As Diogenes approaches a circle of scholars, deep in discussion, one of them calls out with a confident voice, eager to challenge him. "Diogenes, surely you don't expect to find honesty in a place as busy as this." Diogenes lifts the lamp again, letting the midday sun wash over it. "Honesty," he replies softly, "is brightest where it is rarest." His tone isn't accusatory. It is almost sorrowful, as if he is gently mourning something the city has misplaced long ago. The scholars fall quiet. It is one thing to debate truth in theory. It is another to have a man wander through the city, quietly searching for it as though it were a lost coin.
A wealthy trader approaches next, amused by the spectacle. He stands tall, draped in fine clothing, and announces boldly, "Look at me, Diogenes! You won't find a man more honest." Diogenes lifts the lamp, examines him for a long moment, and then shakes his head with quiet certainty. "Your wealth speaks louder than you do," he murmurs, and continues walking. The trader is left standing alone, unsure whether he has been insulted or simply observed with uncomfortable accuracy. As the afternoon stretches on, the purpose of the lamp becomes clearer to those who watch. Diogenes is not mocking the city, he is revealing it. He is not searching for an honest man because he expects to find one. He is searching to remind others of how rare honesty truly is, how easily people deceive, perform, and pretend. His lamp is a symbol, a question, a quiet mirror held up to the crowd. Yet there is a strange warmth to the scene. Diogenes does not accuse anyone directly. He does not shout or scold. Instead, he glides through the crowd with peaceful detachment, his lamp flickering with a small, steady flame that seems to float through the bright air like a fragile secret. By the time the sun begins to sink, Diogenes' steps return toward his simple dwelling. The lamp is nearly burned out, leaving only a faint glow within its glass walls. When he sits down beside his jar, he places the lamp gently on the ground and watches the last ember fade into darkness. He found no honest man today, yet he seems neither disappointed nor surprised. To Diogenes, the search is the lesson. The act of walking through a city full of masks, illusions, and polished performances is a way to strip away the pretense and see people as they truly are. And as night settles over Athens, the city grows quiet once more. The citizens return home, the torches shimmer along the streets, and somewhere amid the calm, Diogenes rests with the quiet certainty of a man who has carried a lamp through the world and discovered truths far more valuable than the one he pretended to seek.
Diogenes walked through the bustling streets of Athens, his simple cloak brushing the stone paths. Around him, the marketplace hummed with life, merchants shouting their wares, children darting between stalls, women carrying baskets of olives and bread. Yet Diogenes' eyes were on something else entirely. He observed people not as a critic, but as a mirror, reflecting their own absurdities. A magistrate, tall and proud in his robes, spotted him from a distance. His face tightened in expectation, the expectation that every citizen bow, every citizen fear authority. He approached Diogenes with deliberate steps, his attendants fanning out behind him. The crowd quieted slightly, sensing the impending confrontation. "Citizen," the magistrate said firm, "you are disrupting the marketplace. You must follow the rules, show respect." Diogenes looked up, meeting the official's gaze with calm eyes. He did not flinch, he did not bow. He simply held out his hand as if measuring the distance between expectation and reality, and then shrugged, a slow, deliberate motion. The crowd exchanged glances, some stifling laughter, others confused. You do not fear me?" the magistrate demanded. Diogenes smiled faintly. "Fear is for those who believe it has power," he replied softly, almost to himself. "I am free." The magistrate frowned. He waved a hand, gesturing to the guards, but they hesitated. Diogenes' presence carried an unspoken authority, a quiet defiance that could not be commanded or constrained. He picked up a simple clay jar lying nearby and placed it squarely in the magistrate's path. A small, almost imperceptible gesture, but enough to disrupt expectation. The magistrate paused, unsure how to proceed. The crowd murmured. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who is this man? Who dares ignore the laws? Diogenes remained still, calm, his gaze moving over the faces around him. There was no malice in his eyes, only clarity, as if revealing a secret no one else dared speak aloud. Then he began to speak, not loudly, not with anger, but with a rhythm that pulled listeners close, inviting reflection. He said, "You chase titles, positions, and honors. You demand respect, yet respect is not bought with robes or threats. Respect is given by those who see truth, who see honesty, who see courage." Some in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in, captivated by the simplicity of his words. Diogenes continued, his voice soft but unwavering. "Power is fragile. Authority is fragile. Those who build their lives on fear are like sandcastles at the tide's edge. They crumble at the smallest shift." He placed a hand on the jar again, tilting it slightly as if daring the magistrate to step forward. The official's eyes flicked between the jar and Diogenes, unsure whether to enforce his command or retreat in bewilderment. The crowd watched, a mix of amusement and awe spreading through them. Diogenes laughed softly then, a sound that was both gentle and sharp, cutting through pretense without cruelty. It was a laugh that carried the weight of truth and the lightness of freedom. "Do not fear what is empty. Do not bow to shadows. Live with clarity, with honesty, with courage, even if the world mocks you." And then he walked on, slowly, deliberately, each step measured, leaving behind a marketplace buzzing with reflection. People whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief, some smiling at the audacity of it all. He moved past merchants and children, past the grand columns of the city, a figure simple in appearance but immense in presence. Every glance he cast, every gesture he made reminded them that bravery could be found in small, unexpected acts. Courage was not always in battle or speech. Sometimes it was in the refusal to obey conventions blindly, in the quiet defiance that unsettles expectation, in the soft smile that reveals an inconvenient truth. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the city, Diogenes disappeared into the winding streets, and yet, even in his absence, his presence lingered, a gentle reminder that freedom is often found in the spaces where rules and fear do not reach. Diogenes' reputation had spread far and wide. People spoke of him in hushed tones in the marketplaces, in the quiet corners of temples, even among scholars in their lofty halls. Some called him mad, others called him wise, but all agreed on one thing. He lived without fear, without shame, without pretense. One evening, as the sun began to fade and the streets glowed with soft golden light, Diogenes appeared in the agora. In his hand, he carried a simple lantern, but he did not light it. Instead, he held it high, letting it sway gently in the evening breeze. People stopped, curious. What was this man doing with a lantern and daylight? He walked slowly among the crowd, eyeing the faces around him. "I am looking for an honest man," he said plainly, his voice carrying over the murmurs. The crowd laughed, thinking it a joke, but Diogenes' eyes were serious. They searched, as if seeing through the layers of illusion, through masks, through fear and pretense. Merchants paused mid-gesture. Children stopped their games. Even elders leaning on canes straightened their backs. There was something in his gaze that unsettled them. He wasn't looking for gold, power, or fame. He was looking for truth, and in that pursuit all else became meaningless. Some approached him with mockery. "Why do you carry a lantern in the daytime?" they asked. Diogenes looked at them calmly. "To see the honest man, for most hide in plain sight, blinded by their own lies."
A young man, bold and curious, stepped closer. "And have you found one?" he asked. Diogenes tilted his head, observing the boy with a faint smile. "Not yet," he said, "but the search is more revealing than the answer. People reveal themselves through how they react to honesty, to freedom, to courage." As he walked, he performed small acts that drew attention. He ignored a patrician's command, picking up a discarded fruit from the ground and eating it with no shame. He spoke plainly to a wealthy merchant about greed. He gestured to a scholar, questioning the usefulness of knowledge without wisdom. Each action, each word, was gentle yet cutting, playful yet profound. The crowd began to murmur, some laughing, some shaking their heads, others reflecting quietly. Diogenes continued moving, holding the lantern high, its empty light a symbol, a question, a challenge. And with each step, he left a trail of curiosity, a sense that the world could be seen differently, less rigidly, more honestly. Eventually, he stopped in the center of the marketplace and turned to face the people. "Look at yourselves," he said softly, "and ask, who are you when no one watches? Who are you when no one judges? Truth is not in your robes, your titles, or your wealth. Truth is in how you live, and how you dare to exist, unafraid and unashamed." And then, without another word, Diogenes walked away, lantern in hand, disappearing into the winding alleys as shadows stretched long across the stone streets. The crowd remained silent for a moment, as if trying to grasp the weight of his presence, then slowly dispersed, each person carrying a tiny seed of reflection planted by a man who lived only by his own rules. Even long after he was gone, the story of the lantern spread. Parents told their children, merchants repeated it to friends, scholars pondered it in their studies, and always the man with the lantern lingered in thought, a symbol of curiosity, of defiance, and of the relentless pursuit of honesty in a world too often blind to it.
By now, Diogenes had become more than a man to the people of Athens. He was a force of nature, a living challenge to every expectation, a mirror reflecting their fears, pride, and absurdities. Stories of him traveled far, whispered from street to street, from teacher to student, from friend to friend. One afternoon, as sunlight poured over the marketplace, Diogenes did something extraordinary, or, as most would see it, outrageous. He performed acts that stripped social conventions bare. He defied modesty, ignored hygiene, and flaunted every rule meant to constrain behavior. And yet, there was purpose behind every gesture. He sought to remind people of the absurdity of fear, shame, and pretense. A crowd gathered, some curious, some scandalized. A nobleman scowled. A merchant whispered, "Who is this man, and why does he do such things?" Diogenes glanced at them, eyes calm, almost compassionate. "I do not do it for shock," he said softly. "I do it for clarity. So you may see yourselves as you are, not as you pretend to be." He laughed, a soft, echoing sound, gentle but piercing. With every act, he peeled away the layers of illusion, the obsession with status, the absurd rituals of etiquette, the fear of judgment.
people could not help but notice the truth in his defiance, even if it made them uncomfortable. At one point, Alexander the Great came to meet him. The young conqueror, towering and proud, expected submission. He asked Diogenes if he could grant him anything. Diogenes looked at him, unshaken, and simply said, "Move aside. You are blocking my son." The crowd gasped. The mighty Alexander, the ruler of armies, could only marvel at the audacity of this simple man. This was Diogenes' philosophy in action, a refusal to be owned by authority, a life lived according to nature rather than convention. Every shocking act, every mockery, every disregard for the social rules carried a lesson. It was not chaos for amusement. It was clarity through provocation. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Diogenes walked alone through the emptying streets. The city buzzed behind him, a world of people both shaken and awakened. His life, his acts, his words, they all left an imprint. A philosophy lived, not written, that freedom, honesty, and courage matter more than wealth, title, or reputation. And though he would eventually pass from the world, stories of Diogenes endured. Children repeated tales of the man who laughed at kings, who carried a lantern searching for truth, who challenged every notion of propriety. Philosophers debated him. Citizens pondered him. Every listener, every reader, every thinker carried a spark of his audacity within themselves. In the end, Diogenes' legacy was simple yet profound: to live authentically, to question boldly, and to remind the world that the most radical act is often just to be yourself, unafraid, unchained, and unbound by the illusions of society.
And so the story ends, not with a dramatic flourish, but quietly, as it should. A man walking into history, leaving behind laughter, questions, and a freedom few dared to claim.